dinghy does say that anyone who arrives here in a dinghy will definitely not be granted asylum. The big question for me is, where on earth do we deport them?
Well, I've got loads of questions, Patrick. Is it music to my ears? Yes, superficially. But we've been here before. And I know Suella Braverman. She's got the right intent. She's got the right courage. But has she got a deep enough plan here? And I do not believe the answer to that question is yes. And part of the reason for that is because however good she might be and whatever her intention is, she hasn't got the expertise and the knowledge around her in the Home Office to make such a thing work. And you mentioned earlier, well, the practical and the political, but actually at this level, those two things come together. And there is no way this can work without some serious conversations taking place in the United Nations over the refugee convention, and also, as has already just been said, in relation to the European Convention on Human Rights. Now, parliamentary sovereignty means that actually an act of the British Parliament is sovereign. It is not questioned and cannot be questioned in the courts because Parliament makes law.
And just on this, Henry, just on this. Other countries ignore rulings all the time. Why don't we start doing it a bit more often? In fact, aren't we one of the top compliers?
No, I agree with you, Patrick, and there are all sorts of things to unpack here, but my point is that this isn't just an issue for the Home Office. I'd like to see the government act a lot more courageously and a lot more forward-leaning on this and say, you know what, this is a whole-of-government thing, and it's not just about immigration, it's about firearms coming into the country, it's about cocaine, it's about opiates, heroin and so on coming into the UK. Our borders are not secure. It just so happens that one of the most sort of publicly obvious demonstrations of that is the dinghies coming across the channel. And indeed, it's a massive problem that has to be stopped. But it's not simply a case of the Home Secretary coming up with a plan or an Act of Parliament. It actually requires a great deal of upstreaming, as it's called, disruption, going all the way along those routes, all the way up those routes, actually going after, hunting the people smugglers who are responsible. And I know because I've done it on the ground in places like the Balkans. I've gone after these people until Tony Blair pulled the funding on it in 2006. But I know that there are what we call nexus points in terms of service providers. And those nexus points, let's say it's somebody who produces false travel documentation or ID cards. And one particular case that I personally dealt with in terms of disrupting involved 4 people of a terrorist network being moved through a people smuggling network. But the point that where we discovered that was as somebody who made false Norwegian ID cards. And that person was providing those to weapons smugglers, narcotic smugglers and people smugglers, as well as terrorist organisations. And so we've got a whole thing here that we have to unpack. And that requires the Foreign Office to engage. It requires the international aid budget to engage. It requires diplomatic engagement with the United Nations and with the European Union. And it requires some incredible robustness.
Henry, just quickly, please do not tell me that we're pinning our hopes on the French here.
Well, we shouldn't be. No, Patrick, we shouldn't be. And if you think back, we left the European Union in part to take control of our borders. Bear in mind that although the French, I think, could do a lot more, the reality is that the French don't have full control over the external borders of the European Union, nor do they have control over the European Union's immigration and asylum policy. There is the French. We should be working with the French to upstream disrupt this because the French don't want these people there any more than we want them here.